So, Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and I welcome you all to another exciting episode of MUMKIN Majlis, MUMKIN Corporate Majlis. I hope you all are doing good. Today we are going to talk about trust and how it adds to organizational culture, and how specifically we'll be talking with reference to our last week's topic, which was psychological safety. So over to you, Saad.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. The previous time we discussed psychological safety, and we thought that trust will be a really insightful topic to discuss after that, given that it has a very close connection to psychological safety. And not just that, but trust is also a key part of a cohesive team, right? So a cohesive team consists, there's actually a model for cohesive team called cohesive team model. And it's results, accountability, commitment, conflict, and trust. So trust is the baseline of a cohesive team. Without trust, you can't have healthy conflicts, you can't have commitments, accountability, and you lose on the results as well. So that's really important. I'd like to share something. There's an organization called Great Place to Work, and they rank companies in the world. I think there's a top 100 list of companies, and also in the region as well, in the Middle East as well. You may have seen some organizations have this plot, Great Place to Work, on their reception. And they do this by engaging the staff of that organization in confidential surveys around well-being, engagement, trust, and performance. And they have some really interesting research on trust. And what they found is that on average, companies which have high levels of trust culture within the organization have an average stock market return, which is 2 to 3 times more than the stock market. So those companies are outperforming the stock market. And the turnover rates of those companies is also a lot lower. So it's about 50% lower than their competitors, as long as their trust is very high. And they also exhibit increased levels of innovation, customer-centric behavior, and increased levels of employee satisfaction. So it's pretty evident that having a higher levels of trust is very important at a team level and an organizational level for a high-performing team and a cohesive team as well. And that brings us to the next question. So if it's important, how do we know what are the markers of a high trust culture, right? So how do you know that you're in a high trust culture? And one of the big hallmarks of that is the employees of the organization. They believe the leaders are credible, right? So when Great Place to Work sends out their surveys and asks these questions, that's the kind of feedback they get from high trust organizations. The employees feel my leaders can be trusted, they are honest, they are communicative, and they are credible. And the other thing is that teams and employees feel they are treated with respect as people and as professionals. This is very important. It's not just about the job you do, but you also feel respected as a person. And this leads to a very high level of respect. And the third thing is they believe that the workplace is fundamentally adding value, right? So that the service they're delivering is making a difference. So these are 3 kind of hallmarks. There are other markers as well, and we will talk about them. But these are 3 clear hallmarks of an organization and team which has a high level of trust. And I'm kind of curious as well. I see there's a message from Hisham. So let's just read this message.
It's
so
an ad, but just don't ban this one.
No, that's great. So your organization got a Great Place to Work certification. That's interesting. So would you like to share anything about why do you think your organization got the certification, or what are your observations on that? I'm curious.
Thanks, and apologies about the background noise. I'm sitting outdoors, so just let me know. Otherwise, I can type instead. But yeah, I was not involved in the actual exercise. But earlier this summer, we worked with Great Place to Work in 4 of our offices in Dubai, Riyadh, Pakistan, and Amman, Jordan, toward to get the certification. I think this was a good move by the company. They hired a culture director to lead this organization and gave her full authority to launch several new programs within the company about taking surveys, about providing psychological safety and getting pulse from all employees, making sure everyone signs their opinions and share their opinions. So these are my observations from that exercise.
I didn't quite hear the last part. Coach Umair, could you pick up on the last part?
I was trying to pick it up, but it was I missed the last few sentences actually.
Okay. Okay. I think Hisham is outside, but thank you anyway for sharing, Hisham. Is there anyone else that would like to share observations from their teams and organizations? After hearing this introduction, what comes to your mind? What do you see in your teams?
Okay, Saad, so while everybody else thinks about sharing something, I just thought of something came to my mind. I was reading a research conducted by Google, and Google summarized it into it's called the Google's criteria for high performing teams or high performance teams. One of the 5 elements that Google gives out as a criteria is dependability. And talking about dependability, I think the epitome of dependability is the trust that the team has among themselves and among each other.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think like dependability, and also it's also about engaging workers. So Peter Drucker, and Peter Drucker is a very famous author. Many of us may have heard of him. He said way back in the early 90s that in the knowledge workers, and I think most of us now, or I think all of us for sure are in the knowledge workers. Knowledge workers have the power to work, where, when, for who, and what they work on. They have a much higher power than, previous types of jobs. And I think with the remote working and hybrid working environment that we have, that makes trust even more important, right? Where you're working from, when you're working from. There's a lot of conversations right now. Some organizations are pushing people to come back to the office. Others are giving them full, they have full power over where they work from. So for example, Facebook, or Meta as they're called now. So I was watching an interview with Mark Zuckerberg. They're very flexible in their way of working. And they're the company who are working on a lot of really complicated problems as well right now in terms of software engineering, etc. So I think that is a really key point. I'd like to add something here as well, is that there's also the element of what kind of frameworks, right? What drives the organizational values. And organizations with high trust culture have very human-centric values. Or this is kind of, you can say, an opinion plus my impression based on research, is they have societal and human values at the core of their decision-making. What do you think about that?
So I missed a part of your.
No, I was just making a point that one of the things that as I've been looking into this topic, and this is quite an important one, is organizations with high trust culture appear to have values that are more centered in society and human values. So their decision making is valued. I mean, sure, numbers and metrics are important, but they're more human focused. And how are we making an impact to society? So I just thought, like, I would ask for your thoughts. What do you think of this point?
Well, this is a very interesting point that you have shared. How about we ask our audience about it? Any of the participants, let's ask our participants, do they agree with this observation, or do they have something to share in this regard? Or so let's see, do we have any volunteers? Or
so can I add something over here?
yes, please.
So I would like to add something to what Saad said, that the organizations who have higher levels of trust, their values are more dependent on their society or societal oriented. Right? So that's correct, and this is what we have seen as well. The organizations who have higher levels of trust, they also have higher levels of engagement in their employees, because they have closeness. So engagement is not just the happiness of employees. Engagement is happiness and satisfaction of the employees, as well as their commitment to their work, to their workplace. So what we have seen in our experience of working with different teams and organizations is that everywhere, wherever the trust level was higher, the engagement was also higher, and the throughput was also better. And wherever the trust level was lower, the engagement was also lower, and the throughput was not good. So recently, I happened to visit an organization. One of the main challenges that the senior management was facing was that people did not own their work. They did not feel responsible for their work, and of course, this is one of the direct consequences that we see whether trust level is low. So, so coming back to the point, there's one more thing over here. When people don't take the responsibility of their work, there was one thing additional happening in that organization, and that was that people were not willing to develop themselves either on their personal level. Means they were not putting any effort for their personal level. So so there was lower levels of trust in this organization. We did not work with this, so we just have had some conversations with their senior leadership. So this is what we have seen over a period of time, that when the trust level is low, people are closer to each other. And closer does not mean that they meet regularly for their work related affairs. Closeness means that they know each other very well. So, I would like to share one more example over here, which was a team workshop. So there were some 21 members in this team when we did trust workshop for them initially, and some of the team members were new to the team. So initially, when we met and when the workshop was running, they did not feel much comfortable about speaking up and so on and so forth. So then we ran a small exercise in that workshop, and that exercise was introducing yourself to a little deeper level, but in a safer way, so that you expose yourself to other people, and you expose your vulnerabilities as well. So the introduction of each person went like this: that my name is Nair, and I come from Pakistan, from the city of Karachi. I have got 7 siblings, and one of the most uh, biggest challenges of my childhood was that I was a shy person, and I was bullied by other boys at school. All right. So what are my hobbies? Okay. So this and this my hobbies, and what is the order of my order in my siblings? So this is that I'm at the third one in my sibling. And what has been the worst job, and why do you call that a worst job in your career history? So this kind of introduction, it is a safe introduction, and what you do is that you expose your vulnerabilities, a little bit of personal details in this section. So what happened after we did this exercise? Some interesting things came up. People started. Two people shared that they are not strong in navigation skills, and and they lack sense of direction. So if they are not using Google navigation, they get lost. So two people in the room shared this, and at least three people in the room shared that they were very shy and they were bullied by others. So there were some common things started coming up. Two people shared that they love football. Now, when one person shared that he loved football, and after that, a few minutes later, another person shared that he also loved football. These two people stared at each other. They did not know this thing in common. So, at the end of this half an hour exercise, where the 21 people shared their common interests and introduced themselves with a little bit of more detail, the level of trust started to increase, and they started feeling closer to each other than before, right? So the feeling of closeness means you are able to share something without having to guard yourself in presence of your team. This is the trust that we look at, or we are looking forward to at organization level. So I hope I have been able to put my point across.
Excellent. So nearby there is a very, very interesting question from Hisham, and I would like you to answer that question.
Please
So
go
Hisham
ahead.
says, based on my observation, how to introduce cascading responsibility and accountability in a culture that favors centralized authority. Whenever we try an initiative to foster self-organized autonomous teams, we face pushback from the leaders to appoint central figures to own entire programs and tell everyone what to do.
All right. Now in here, it is certainly possible. But remember, you said you would like to give this answer this question,
No, no,
right?
I
Please go
said,
ahead.
I said I would like you to answer this question.
Okay, all right. Let me. I overheard it. Let me read the
Okay.
question again. So, based my observation, how to introduce cascading responsibility and accountability in a culture that favors centralized authority. Right. Whenever we try an initiative to foster self-organized autonomous teams, we face pushback. All right. Now see this. Now there's another element of interest over here. See, in every individual who is working for an organization, there are two things. One is the organizational vision, and one is personal vision. The organizations who are successful, these are the ones who take care of the personal visions of their employees. And because if they don't do that, employees tend to lose their motivation and interest in their work. And of course, the organization suffers at the end because the organization keeps paying them and they don't get the throughput, which is required for these employees. Now, what we have seen, I'll give you a real life example. There was a team of 11 people that I happened to coach some time back. And we have had some couple of sessions with the team members, and then regular sessions with four the team manager and three office team leads, probably for 6 months. Over a period of time, the team manager was a very smart guy. So he learned to understand that he needs to be personally, I would repeat the word, personally interested in the goals of his people. So 11 team members. He started, it means 10 team members and 11 by including himself. So he started to meet each and every individual once in a month, asking about, tell me, forget about the organization goals. We know the work gets done somehow. I'm more interested in developing you as a person. What is that something that you are working on this month or this quarter, and so on and so forth. So when I happened to meet some of his team members, they were so happy about their leader, and they really felt very much associated, and they felt honored to work for that team, because they felt that the team leader was genuinely interested in his goals. Now, when the team leader was doing all this, the corporation did not ask him to do that. It was his personal excellence that he kept a close contact with each of the team members, and he was genuinely and personally interested in meeting one to one with each of them, asking about the progress. So the corporation was not doing that. Team leader was doing that, right? So even the
I think
point that I'm
we've
trying to
lost.
make over
I'm
here.
not the only one that's lost the audio, right? Yeah.
No, I can hear you.
Okay. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that corporations' visions are sometimes forced by the senior management. It is the team leader also holds a great responsibility in keeping or maintaining the trust within his team. So did I put my point across? This was to address Hisham's point when he
Yeah.
said that your organizations push their agendas. And just a minute, let me just read it.
The
Cas-
leaders push.
okay, so cascading responsibility. Let me come back to this as well. Cascading responsibility. See this. When we talk about cascading responsibility, everyone working in the organization, in an organization, they know very well that their vision should meet with the organizational vision. Because if the visions don't meet, that means either they try to pull the organization in a different direction, or finally the organization gets tired and exhausted, and the organization dies. If people try to move the organization in all different directions according to their own interests, so everyone knows that their vision has to match with the organization vision.
Hmm.
Right. So now let me just read it out again.
While you read it out,
Yeah.
Nair bhai,
Yeah.
I would like to point another aspect of what Hisham has pointed out. Referring back to the book by Patrick Lencioni called The Five Dysfunctions of Team, what Hisham, the details Hisham has provided also indicate the lack of vulnerability-based trust among the team, because only then the leaders would push back and ask for appointment of central figures who would tell the team to what to do. So that is also an indicator where the team members do not feel uh, safe enough, or they do not feel protected enough in when it comes to their vulnerabilities, that they expect the leader or the central figure to tell them what to do, not instead of taking some initiatives to move forward as an autonomous organization.
Okay. All right. Thanks for adding this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Hisham, would you like to add anything else to this?
I would like to add, if Hisham is saying something, then I have something to add.
Hisham is saying something, but we can't hear him.
He has a message in the chat, like he has messaged in the chat as well.
Typing because of the background noise. I'm sorry about that. So just type a comment.
Okay.
I think Hisham, maybe we cannot hear him because there is a distortion from his side. Can I address the point of cascading responsibility? Right. So
Yes.
coming back to the point, everyone working in the organization, they know their vision has to be aligned with the organization vision, and that's how the responsibilities get cascaded. So this is one point. Now the other point, Hisham says that whenever we try to try an initiative to foster self-organized autonomous teams, we face pushback from leaders to appoint central figures to own entire programs and tell everyone what to do. Now I would like to add over here something related to the leadership of the team members. Now, who is this leadership who's pushing back? Is it the middle management or is it the senior leadership? So that has to be identified. If it is a middle management, then, and let's say I am one of the middle managers, and my other middle managers are pushing back to have this centralized arrangement, then I can coach them, and I can help them understand that what could be the most suitable way of leading their team. So this is my point of view, and of course you may have a different point of view. So this is one thing that I wanted to add, that you can also coach with not only the peers, means who are the middle management layer, but you can also coach back their leadership by asking them powerful questions and helping them think. I can bring a real life example over here. I know a leader who is a director of his department. Director of a department having 7 to 8 members in his department. The guy has got a high level of trust in his team, so much so that a team continues to get offers from outside, but they don't go. They don't leave him because they love to work with this manager. So over a period of time, he has developed high levels of trust with his team and with his senior leadership in the company as well. How did he do that? For instance, with his team, he meets them quite often, and makes sure that he conducts a heart-to-heart conversation with them. So remains on a very personal level. So this is how he has built trust with his own team members. Regarding the senior leadership of the company, he is a director, and of course he has a vice president and to report to. So what he has done over a period of time, he has developed presentations and pumping his ideas, which are good ideas, to his senior leadership over a period of time, over and over again. And we have seen people being influenced by him when he has repeatedly done this over a period of time, over and over again, in a very polite way. very polite and very decent way. So coming back to the point, see this whatever that we're talking about trust, this is contagious. Whenever you talk about something, up to a certain extent, at least certain extent, I believe that this is contagious, and other people start seeing that and then start adopting that as well. So I hope I was able to put my point across.
Thank you very much, Nadir bhai. Very valid points and very interesting stories that you shared. So moving forward, you mentioned about Nadir bhai mentioned about vulnerability.
Yeah.
So how about we talk about a little bit? Let's try to understand what vulnerability means and why what relationship does vulnerability have with trust? So what thoughts do you have about this?
So I like to share a story here of vulnerability and trust, and it's interesting because this is I think Simon Sinek, who's like a famous author, he has a story where he goes for conferences all over the world, and one of his conferences he stayed at a Four Seasons resort. And what he found during that stay was that the staff at the resort was asking him, "Sir, how's it going? Are you doing okay?" They would always say hello, but not in a pretentious way. They would say it in a very human way, because as human beings, we know when someone is doing something for a commission versus if they actually mean it. So he was really impressed by this, right? So he was like, wow, this is amazing. It's not just because it's 5-star. People seem genuinely happy and they're vulnerable and they want to know if I'm okay. So the next day on his breakfast, he asked the barista who's making his coffee, "How do you like working for Four Seasons?" And he says, "I love it." So obviously Simon Sinek, his ears really perk up when he hears this. He's like, oh, he doesn't say I like it. I like means I like my job. I like everything. I do this for a living. He says, I love it. It's like a next level, like an emotional connection with the workplace. So he asked him, like, what is the one thing in this place that makes you love your job? And this guy said that during the day, the entire day, not just my manager, but other managers as well, come up to us and ask us, how are we doing? Is there any chat? What can they do to help us improve our job? Is there something that we need from them? They give us an opportunity to be vulnerable, because anytime your manager asks you, is everything okay? Are you facing any challenge? He's telling you that it's safe for you to feel vulnerable in front of me, right? It's safe for you to express yourself and express your challenges. And he's encouraging that. And he's not penalizing that for you. And then the same guy also said to Simon Sinek, he said, I also, by the way, work part-time in the Caesar Palace. And in the Caesar Palace, I just want to get my money and leave, because over there, it's purely numbers driven. That's all the managers there ask. They never ask me how I'm doing. They never ask me if I have any challenges that they could help with. They just ask me, how much coffee did you sell? So I just wanted to share that at the start of this, because you mentioned the topic of vulnerability. And I thought this story really highlights really well how two major chains like Caesar's Palace and Four Seasons, like, the experience of working there can be so different depending on vulnerability and trust. So back over to you.
Interesting. Very interesting. So Abdul Wasi has rightly pointed out that vulnerability means a weakness, right? So what does vulnerability bring into an organization? Obviously, the need for being protected, right, Saad? So let's look at a little bit about it. What is vulnerability, and how does it relate with trust and so to say psychological safety? So when a worker feels vulnerable, what is that state of vulnerability? When he has a weakness, for example, or when there's a deficiency of skill, a perceived deficiency of skill, or any personal shortcoming, or a mistake that an employee would make.
Can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, so I was talking about vulnerability, the state of vulnerability, and what happens in that state of vulnerability. So I was talking about an existence of a weakness, a skill deficiency, or a mistake by some employee, or interpersonal shortcomings, or anything that puts you or puts an employee in a position where he starts feeling the need for being protected. That's vulnerability. So what do we understand from this is that if any organization has to prosper, it has to create a culture of vulnerability-based trust. What is vulnerability-based trust? That an employee, when he or she feels vulnerable, should be his need to be protected must be addressed in that team, so that the whole team can prosper and be more productive. What do you say, Saad?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I just want to highlight, I think what you've raised is a really insightful point. And I see someone's hand is up as well in the audience. We have Nagman's. So I believe you can unmute and please share if you have any thoughts on this.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum all. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I have been a teacher, and by the way, it's Nagmana Fazal, wrong spelling. Okay. And I've been teaching in an organization for now more than 16 years. Vulnerability may not necessarily mean that you have a weakness or something, you have anything to hide. Vulnerability maybe is that you do not trust anyone with your abilities. Like if you're going to say that I can do it, and this is the new thing that I can try, the administration maybe will not let you do it, and then you hide that thing, like you're not okay. It's if you have to just do this work and get just do it, and don't have to share your abilities with them. So I believe that if in this case the trust, and one thing that I have been facing is that the lack of feedback from the middle management and the senior management. And that was one very good thing that someone said, that the story that you cited told us about, Saad, that the top brass is going to come and ask the ordinary employees that how was your day, how do you feel, and just these encouraging words are going to decrease your vulnerability. Or let's say vulnerability may be that you're not at ease. It's not about your skills, I believe. A person may be very skilled, but will not let the skills show because no one is there to acknowledge it. This is what I think.
Yes, Saad, what do you think?
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. I was actually going to ask you, because you were just telling us about the vulnerability and trust. So I'm really curious to hear about your insight. You know, how do you link these two in context of what we just heard?
Yeah. So, well, I think what the sister said is true. Vulnerability is, if I summarize vulnerability, it's a state where an individual needs to be protected. Or individual feels the need to be protected, and that protection, if available to that employee or that individual, is the vulnerability-based trust in the organization. And if you may allow me to connect the vulnerability-based trust with psychological safety, how would we know that psychological safety exists in an organization when there is a general belief that no one will be punished or humiliated for speaking up with the ideas, questions, or the weaknesses or mistakes that they have. So summarizing it all up, the vulnerability is a state where an individual or employee or a person feels the need to be protected. And the protection provided by the organization to such a state is vulnerability-based trust, which in return results in psychological safety. And a psychologically safe organization, you know, we all know very well, how does that prosper?
We've been talking a lot about the need to feel protected. And may I share something if you have considered your point?
Yeah, sure.
So this reminded me, this need to feel, I go to a very, very direct and very visceral example of why it's so important, this, the issue of vulnerability and trust as well. Sometimes, okay. In the US Navy, there's a team called the SEALs. SEALs are the world's most elite soldiers, basically workforce. And even in SEALs, there's a team in the US Navy. They're called SEAL Team 6. SEAL Team 6 is the world's most elite task force. They're super soldiers. And it comprises of, I think, 1,700 people only. Out of the thousands and thousands of people that serve in the US Navy, only 1,700 people serve in SEAL Team 6. And as you can imagine, when a squadron of 16 or 20 people is doing a special spec ops operation, they are very vulnerable. They don't have a choice, right? They are under immense existential threat of wherever they're operating. So how do they select the people that go in these teams? Initially, you might think on the outset, okay, they might select the most effective person, right? Like the most effective combatant, the most high performer. But in fact, this is not true. The way they put together their team is they choose between trust and performance. So rather than going for someone with a very high performance, right, but very low levels of trust, they vet people, even if it's a medium performer, but fairly high levels of trust. Those are the people they choose. Because when you're in the battlefield, when you're in the trenches, you need to be able to rely on the people around you, right? Because you are naturally vulnerable in that way. You don't have a choice. Like, do I get to be vulnerable or not? You are vulnerable, right? So it's SEAL teams. I think this is a really good indicator, because if you think about performance, high performing organizations, what could be more high performing than the world's most elite task force team? And they weigh trust as very, very highly when they select their members of the team. So I think the trust and vulnerability thing comes together very, very evidently in that scene. So I just wanted to share that. There's a question from Furqan Khan. How does one measure the level of trust in an organization? What is the matrix of measurement? So, Coach Umar, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So let me put it in a different way. Let me flip the question with your permission, Saad. So let's first see, how do we identify if there's a lack of trust, or if there's a trust issue in an organization? So what I've been able to identify are two factors that would indicate that there's a lack of trust in an organization. First being, if the people remain quiet, even if they are assured of safety. Like if people are assured that whatever they say will be addressed and they will not be punished for that, they still remain quiet. That's an indicator of lack of trust. Another indicator is that even in an organization, when there are anonymous surveys, how these surveys work in organizations. So even if an anonymous survey does not bring any results, that's a very high indicator that there's a lack of trust in the organization. So I hope we can relate the answer to Furqan's question. When the first step is to identify if the trust exists or if the trust is deficient in an organization. These are the two indicators. So once that is established, then we can move forward to the level of trust. They can be different. The system of measuring level of trust could vary from organization to organization. I don't think there would be any benchmarks for that. So that's what I can say in this regard.
So I would like to add something over here, addressing some of the few points that our participants have mentioned. So coming back to Ms. Mana's point about vulnerability. See, there are different sorts of vulnerability over here. Vulnerability, let me explain you a little bit, and then if you have any questions, please raise your question. So it's not about only having the weakness. Sometimes the vulnerability is about being able to or is about the about you expressing some of the errors, let's say, some of the warning messages that you have come across, or something that you would like to highlight and get everyone's attention. So this is where you are vulnerable. Sometimes in some of the vulnerability, you are about to ask someone a favor, means to do something, and then whether the other person does it or not, you are vulnerable, right? So this is one of the ways, or different, you can say, different forms of vulnerability, right? So sometimes you lack some of the skills, and you are left acquiring some of the skills. In that case, you are vulnerable to the rest of the people. So vulnerability is anything that somehow, up to a certain extent, can make you feel uncomfortable about speaking up. So this is how vulnerability is defined by many different people, including Patrick Lencioni. Now, how to increase the trust so that you don't feel vulnerable? This is what we have already talked about. So this is about the vulnerability that I wanted to clarify. Then I would like to clarify the question that Hisham asked a few minutes before. If you have anyone has any comments about vulnerability, please raise your comments. You can speak up, open your mic and speak up, or you can write in the chat below. All right. So if not, then we'll go ahead. Now, regarding Hisham's point, now see, it is certainly possible that the organization has got a lower levels of trust. It is certainly possible. Now, in that case, how is the trust level in your own team? Are the people in your team, do they feel open and brave enough to come and share their challenges, or as I mentioned, their weaknesses, or as I mentioned, any warning whatsoever? So do they feel open? I mean, they feel comfortable? If yes, that means the level of trust is higher. If not, that means the level of trust is low. So the first and the foremost thing is to increase the level of trust in your teams and the teams around you before even you go and
I think we lost Naya bhai.
Yeah, I think so.
I would like to add something about the trust here. So one of the key indicators in an organization where the trust,
to listen to your managers, delivery managers to
let me mute nearby because I think he's having some signal issues. So I was telling you about one of the key indicators in an organization that the trust level is low is that people don't like to experiment. They don't like to innovate the way they work. They work in silos. They don't share the internal details of their working. Okay, so they don't share how they work. They only are focused on what are they working on. Okay, because they do not feel comfortable sharing the way they work and open themselves to criticism from other departments and other individuals in the organizations coming from the different departments. So this starts creating silos in an organization where everyone is focused on their work, and not my work attitude is more cultivated in such organizations because they are not ready to experiment. They are not ready to mingle cross-functionally and come up with new ideas.
Excellent. So, Saad, let's see a little bit. Let's explore a little bit about what happens when there's a lack of trust in a team. So, what do you think? What is the consequence? What is the biggest consequence of not having trust? Let me share my thoughts first, and then I'll invite you. So, what I feel is that a team without trust is not really a team. It's a group of people. It's a group of people who might work together for the same cause, but they can't be called a team. And obviously, when they are not a team, they won't be achieving that common objective that they're working on. So what will happen eventually is there will be no sharing of information. The progress will be very disappointing because they won't be sharing information with each other because they don't trust each other. There will be a continuous battle going on for rights and responsibilities. You remember, you would have heard that it's not my job. When something is not done, it's not my job. Okay, my company pays me only for 8 hours. These are common statements that we hear. When there's a something to be done, you often, when the teams do not have trust, there's no cooperation between those teams. So the result is that it doesn't matter how capable or how talented the people in that team are, they will still not be able to reach their full potential if they lack trust. So that's what comes to my mind when I talk about consequences of not having trust.
I would like to add that in addition to, so this is, it cascades, right? So if the team is not functioning well and the attitude internally is like that, then the external service that they're providing also starts to go down a lot, right? So the level of internal service and external service is always very closely correlated. And one of the consequences that if the internal team and organizational culture is not one built on trust, is that their service to clients, starts to dip. And I think a good example of this, it's a case that was even to this day, it's widely studied, is a couple of years ago, we may have all heard of the United Airlines incident where they dragged the passenger out of the plane kicking and screaming, and they even injured the passenger as well because he did not surrender his seat. And when they investigated this incident, what they found was the staff knew that they were not doing the right thing, but they were so scared of the consequences of not following this rule that were imposed by the company. So the staff did not trust that their organization will take care of them if they deviate from their set of rules because of the context. And it led to this really, really horrific incident. So the point I guess I'm trying to make here is the service that organizations and teams give to clients that start to significantly dip when the level of trust is not there, right?
Excellent. So this indicates that the culture of trust or high trust culture in organizations is beneficial not only for them to achieve their targets, internal targets. It's absolutely necessary to provide better service to the external customers. Abdul Wasi has pointed out that when there's no trust, suspicion, fights, negative competition occurs. Very well said, very rightly said. Okay, so can we talk about a few ways to build higher level of trust? So Saad, how to cultivate trust? So the first thing that flashes into my mind is start trusting others. Every team member, when they start trusting every other team member, a culture of mutual trust is cultivated. As they say, my coach used to tell me to say that whatever we focus on, we get more of it. So start focusing on trusting each other, and you'll get more trust in return. So that's one basic thing how trust can be cultivated. Another thing that comes to my mind is inform everybody in the team about your availability or unavailability. When the team knows when you're available, that's where they communicate with you, that's where they talk with you, that's where they share with you, that's where they engage you in the things that they need. So they trust you because they know that you're available. Another very important point that I would like to share is keep your commitments. Whatever you committed, it's now your responsibility. Be accountable to that. So the more you're known to keep your commitments, the more you will be trusted. What else, Ad? What comes to your mind?
What you just said at the last point, I think that's for me at least personally, that's super important, right? Because delivering on what you promise to deliver is, I think the gold standard for developing a brand of trust around you is when people know that, you are going to do what you said you would. And if you cannot for whatever reason, then having that open communication as well. So I think communication is also a very important part of this. Encouraging your teammates to be open with you, to talk to you, and just to even break this down a level down. As a person, what can you do? the easiest way to ask questions. Ask open-ended questions of your colleagues about what they're doing, why they're doing that, what is their goal. Get to know about what they're doing, not necessarily just because you want something from them, but approach them and have open-ended conversations with them, because it builds that connection and that level of communication that is really the bedrock of trust. Without communication, trust and communication almost go hand in hand. And it's super important, I think, to have those open-ended conversations among colleagues, right? And I think even if the organization doesn't have high level of trust, you as a human being, you can take the matter into your own hands, and you can be the one that starts to have those conversations, right? So maybe the first couple of times people might even look at you in a weird way, like, why is this guy being so open with me? But as the time progresses, it will become the norm, and they will start to even mimic your behavior, and that's how culture develops, right?
Excellent. So that what I understand from your point is that the team should focus on holding regular meetings more often and discussing things that are that are incidental to cultivating more trust. I would like to share my personal story here with you.
Please.
So in 2016, I joined an organization in Saudi Arabia, which was a group of companies, and they had 172 companies under their belt. None of them was profitable, or most of them were not profitable, except a couple of them. So, and I was the vice president of finance in that company. So it was a very big challenge for me, because in most of those teams, I noticed that they do not even have the patience to talk to each other, or they were literally fighting the cross-departmental or cross teams fighting that I had to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And then I started thinking about it. An idea came to my mind. I started meeting them on a daily basis. And in those meetings, they were only open-ended questions. We did not discuss about any results. We did not discuss about any profitability issues or anything. There were only open-ended questions. The first question that I asked them was, how can each one of us do something small and doable that our team becomes a preferable team for everyone to work with? And this gave them some food for thought. And eventually, I mean, there was a lot of progress in that. So the point that you just shared about having open-ended questions, that reminded me of this incident. So yes, regular meetings, regular informal meetings, probably having open-ended questions, having open-ended discussions would definitely cultivate more trust. So let's take some comments from the chat. I think there are some. Oh, there are a lot of comments. Nakmana said it comes with a wholesome attitude change. Yes. What else? Proper feedback, Saad. So do you think teams that have a proper feedback or effective feedback system would have more cultivated more trust among themselves?
Absolutely. And I think with the feedback, it's very important to be objective, right? So with feedback, being objective rather than, so the way that I would say it is, be hard on the problem, but soft on the person. I think that's the key. That's how you cultivate trust in people, is when you tell someone feedback in a very objective, measurable, very specific way, which also gives them something actionable to do with it, right? So I think that's really key. How you give the feedback is very key to whether it results in more trust or less trust. Because if the feedback is not very objective and it's just very emotional, then it will have the opposite effect. But if the feedback is well-intentioned, and I think we have to always remember that as human beings, we are highly tuned. We know when someone is being sincere with us and is well-intentioned, and when someone is being insincere with us and wants to pull us down. We have inbuilt radars for this thing, very strong ones, and you cannot deceive them, right? So trust is not something that you can fake. You can fake a lot of things. You can fake knowing a skill, but you cannot fake sincerity and trust. I think that's why it's such an interesting and key issue. So that's how I would say that. Yeah.
Wonderful. So Abdullah has pointed out that talk and communicate to others more about what good characteristics do you think about other persons? Okay, wonderful. Be true to what you want to do. That's a very important point, Saad. I think it coincides with what you just said. Start trusting your instincts, stop pulling other people's legs, feedback. Excellent. So, Saad, we've talked about how to cultivate trust. What about what not to do while cultivating trust? What are the don'ts?
Yeah, I would say um, in all teams, if you go to a team, and you ask them, right, this is a hypothetical scenario, and you'll say, who is the one person that you don't want to work with the team, right? They will point to one person, it's like, I don't want to work with this guy. No one wants to work with this guy because we know he is not trustworthy, or he will not have our back. And it's interesting because a lot of times those are the people who are also very numbers driven, and so they will do whatever it takes to move ahead, right, or to deliver their goals, and it has a consequence. As organizations often reward people who meet numbers, they don't reward people who who create trusting culture. So I think that's something that needs to change. So in terms of what was your question again? Was it that what you shouldn't do or should do?
What are the don'ts? What should we,
Yeah.
what should we
So the
not do?
don'ts, so the don'ts, that's what I was confused. So the don'ts would be, from my personal suggestion would be that don't chase numbers. Become curious about people and learn about your team. Don't chase performance targets at the cost of relationships. That's I would say that would be a number one don't for me. Even though we will see around us many people in senior positions who have done that and have been rewarded, but that comes at a very high cost, and that's effectively kind of the cusp of our discussion, that what is the cost of that lack of trust. And as I said in the beginning, organizations with high trust culture outperform their peers 200 to 300% in the long term.
Excellent. So what comes to my mind is in order for the teams to cultivate more trust, the team members must never overcommit. Because when you overcommit, you always underdeliver. And when you underdeliver, you basically lose your trust.
Absolutely.
Never cover up your mistakes. Every human being makes mistakes, except your mistakes.
I would like to share something that cultivates trust in an organization is your orientation. Whether you are oriented towards yourself or you are oriented towards the other people. So if you're always looking for what's in it for me, then that lowers the trust, that lowers the relationship between you and the other people. But if you empathize more with the other person and look from his point of view as well, then only you are able to take the trust and relationship to the next level.
Excellent addition.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Saad, we are running out of time. I would just like to touch on another point, another concept, which is the difference between a victor and a victim mindset. So in order for us to, or in order for any team to have a higher trust culture, every team member would need to understand the difference between a victor and a victim mindset. If the team plays victim, the trust levels would be low. If the team plays victor, obviously the trust levels will be higher. And the victor mindset is that everybody is accountable for what they're doing. Everybody just takes responsibility of their actions, and everybody is changeable. Everybody can be changed. Everybody is flexible towards the common goodness of the team.
I think that's really deep and very, very interesting insight. And it's something that we can start actioning today, right? You don't have to wait for some top level change at the top level. you can drive this change. You have the power to change your mindset from victim to victor. So thank you for that. And I think that brings us to the end of our discussion today, because we're on time now as well.
Yes. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. It was a very good discussion. If you would like to talk to any one of us on a one-to-one discussion, we're always available. Just go to our website, www.mumkin.co, and book your free call with one of our coaches. We'll see you after 2 weeks. Take care and ma salama.
Thank you.